Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marcia Gordon. I'm President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the first of 4 State of the Economy sessions presented by PCSB Bank. The first one today is entitled How Westchester Lives. And I'm sure you can see the panel of experts. I'll be introducing them all. We're in for a very robust and informative discussion. But before we begin, I want to introduce Michael Shaliro, the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending for PCSB Bank, to say a few words. Michael?
Thanks so much, Marcia. Appreciate being here and appreciate all the work that the Business Council has done on this series. This is our 3rd year sponsoring the State of the Economy, and we love collaborating with the Business Council on making this a great event. It's a great 4-part series, like Marcia said. I also want to thank the panel. We have a great panel today, and the Business Council always does a great job of putting these panels together for each segment. We have affordable housing, otherwise known as attainable housing, development, banking, legal. So a great panel to give a lot of feedback on this topic of how Westchester lives. I also want to always do a pitch for people that are watching that are not members of the Business Council. Please strongly consider joining. It's a terrific organization and it's very cost effective, and you'll certainly get your value out of it, and certainly programs like this and all the in-person events that we have. So please consider joining the Business Council as well. And again, I want to thank Marcia and the Business Council for putting this together. And so happy about this collaboration on this panel. And our bank, PCSB, is proud of all the work that we've done in this segment, helping people finance, either purchase, build, or refinance all types of development, either commercial or residential, including affordable housing in Westchester County. So with that, I'll throw it back to Marcia. Thanks again for all the work you and your staff have done on this, and look forward to a great morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And first of all, we want to thank PCSB Bank for your continued support, and very, very important support. And I think, I said it during the pandemic, and I'll say it now with the banking crisis, and I'm sure Michael Goldrick will have more to say about this later. But we have been told by the U.S. Chamber economists, top economists, and others that it's the community banks that are always there and that are safe and that are responsive to the community. And we thank you for everything that PCSB Bank does for businesses of all sizes and for community organizations. You're a great citizen. So thank you so much. It's my pleasure also to recognize 2 other sponsors today. RM Friedland is one of our sponsors, and I know Sarah Jones-Matura, the president, is on. They're the largest commercial real estate services firm headquartered in Westchester County, with more than a 50-year track record of success advising building owners and occupiers. It's the only commercial real estate brokerage company in its markets that is experts across all asset types. And their award-winning team is well-positioned to help execute any real estate strategy at the highest level. So to RM Friedland, thank you so much. And then Westchester County Office of Economic Development, led by Bridget Gibbons, who's our partner in so many things that we do. They continue their focus this year on workforce development with training programs to help workers obtain well-paying, in-demand careers in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and in 2023, we'll be looking to offer training for careers in clean energy. Very, very important. Again, to learn more about the county's efforts, go to westchestercatalyst.com/work. So to PCSB Bank, our presenting sponsors, and our supporting sponsors, RM Friedland and Westchester County Office of Economic Development, thank you so much for everything that you do. So on with the show. Over the last decade, the Business Council of Westchester has assumed a leadership role in smart development for the county. We brought together a broad section of developers, builders, sales, and marketing real estate leaders from across the county to stay focused on the economic development of Westchester. Real estate is the largest industry of the county that brings in new residents, drives employment from real estate sales to construction to building product suppliers, and so much more. In the last decade alone, there's been exponential growth in the number of major players in the real estate market, from our homegrown leaders like Capelli, Ginsberg, McQuestion, Robert Martin, who have now been joined by regional and national players like RXR, Greystar, Extel, Quatera, Rose Equity, and many, many more. The rebirth of Westchester's, if I left anyone out, Mark and everyone else, please say so. You always get into trouble when you do this. The rebirth of Westchester's urban centers as highly desirable places to live is obvious to everybody. All you need to do is look in our cities. We see sleek new buildings in New Rochelle, Peekskill, Portchester, Yonkers, White Plains. Our downtowns are being revitalized with new economic vibrancy. Their popularity is proven by the number. For example, in New Rochelle alone, Stella, a 380-unit tower, is 92% leased since its opening less than a year ago. One Clinton Park with 352 units is 60% filled since opening last June, and 333 Huguenot, which has 285 units, is almost fully leased and occupied. Thousands of apartment building developments are dotting the urban skylines across Westchester. In addition to what is being built or on the drawing boards, we also have the governor's proposed housing compact to build transit-oriented, affordable housing in Westchester municipalities. The Business Council of Westchester has been very supportive of the governor's plan. Mixed into this environment, we're also keenly aware of the recent financial crisis, rising costs of construction, and interest rates. So, as we look to the future, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to discuss what lies ahead. To provide insight into this question, the Business Council of Westchester has brought together 6 leaders representing various facets from the realm of Westchester housing, construction, and marketing. And so now we look at the state of the economy and where Westchester lives. And I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel of experts from various facets of the real estate community here in Westchester. Joe Apicella, Joe, wave please, is Executive Vice President of McQuestion Development, LLC. He was voted Westchester's best business person. He's an accomplished senior real estate executive, responsible for the acquisition, approval, financing, and construction of more than $2 billion worth of development in the tri-state area. After joining McQuestion in 2015 as the Executive Vice President, Joe expanded his exceptional expertise in managing all aspects of commercial real estate development, including site compliance, legal documentation, government approval and grant awards, regulatory compliance, lease negotiations, and asset management. Thank you, Joe, for being here. Greg Ballou is Division President for New York Tri-State Area for Quatera. As Divisional President for Quatera, also known as Lennar, or used to be formerly known as, right? Lennar Multifamily Communities, or LMC. I hope I said that right, Greg. Greg Ballou leads a regional team with responsibility for all development operations for the company in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania markets. So he will be able to give us a very comprehensive regional look. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Debbie Dorn is the Senior Vice President of Sales for Houlihan Lawrence. She oversees the sales of its 30+ offices and over 1,400 sales associates throughout Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and Fairfield counties. They're the leading real estate company throughout Westchester County. Michael Goldrick is the President and CEO of PCSB Bank. They're a $2 billion commercial bank headquartered in Yorktown Heights, with 14 branches located throughout Westchester, Putnam, Rockland, and Dutchess counties. In January, this past January, PCSB Bank merged into and became a subsidiary of Brookline Bancorp, which now holds $11 billion in assets through Brookline Bank, Bank Rhode Island, and PCSB Bank. Congratulations, Michael. Prior to the merger, Michael was Executive Vice President and Chief Loan Officer for PCSB Bank since 2012. Wilson Kimball is President and CEO of the Municipal Housing Authority for the City of Yonkers, also known as Macy. She serves as City of Yonkers Zoning Board Chair, has held the position of Commissioner of Planning and Economic Development for a decade at the City of Yonkers, and is a national speaker and writer on climate resiliency, and so committed to climate resiliency. Thank you, Wilson, in affordable housing. And we're going to be celebrating Wilson as a 2023 Business Council of Westchester Hall of Fame Women in Business Success Award winner. And Richard Nightingale, President and CEO of WestHab Incorporated. They're a nonprofit developer of affordable housing and provider of social services headquartered in Yonkers. In WestHab's 40-year history, they've developed about 1,000 units at a total investment of over $220 million and placed 9,628 job seekers into employment. Richard, you do it all for the people you serve as well. Thank you so much. And Mark Weingarten, a partner at Del Bello, Dinellen, Weingarten, Weiss and Whitaker, LLP. Mark concentrates his law practice in land use, real estate, and municipal law, representing owners and developers of commercial and residential real property. He and his firm represent many of the largest and most successful real estate organizations doing business in New York State. Mark and his firm estimate that they are currently involved in projects containing more than 30,000 residential units in various stages of development. So what an esteemed panel we have, and we have a lot to cover here. So, Mark, you're the first one we're going to start with.
Right.
You certainly have unique access to what's going on in this market from a zoning and planning perspective. So now please give us a 35,000-foot view of what's happening in the world of planning and zoning as it relates to the residential real estate market today.
Sure. In 2 minutes, right? Yeah, no problem. Okay.
But no problem. It could be a full
That's
year
okay.
course.
Look, thank you, Marcia, and thank you for the opportunity. These past few years, we have been benefiting, all of us, from a very strong economy. You see the thousands of units that are up there. We're working on millions of square feet of commercial space as well. We have companies like Regeneron, thank goodness, that are growing and growing. Healthcare systems that are adding hospitals. There's just been a tremendous amount of development that's been going on. We're all hoping towards working towards a casino license in Yonkers. So there's a lot of exciting things, and many of us have never been busier in our careers. The reason this works is we work with municipalities, particularly in the urban areas, where we've worked to have more flexible and mixed-use zoning to try to speed up the process and to get these sites ready to get built when the market forces are behind them. But now there are major concerns, but particularly in these particular sectors, you're all aware of them. We still have office vacancies at record highs. We have buildings that just must be repurposed because they have no value without it. We have the retail market, which is in shambles. Available tenants have decreased dramatically. Businesses are taking less space. COVID has accelerated all of this, internet shopping. We have all of this that we have to deal with from a zoning and planning perspective to have these properties back working for us. There's also, as Marcia mentioned, serious storm clouds right now, and interest rates and equity requirements are rapidly increasing by the week, let alone the banking crisis, which is threatening the available supply of debt. Labor costs have been escalating. Lack of infrastructure, particularly over Route 287, is still a huge, north of 287 is a major issue for us. The elimination of the SALT deduction has made our area a little bit less attractive, and people looking maybe at some of the red states to go. The cost of energy has gone up dramatically, and not only are we doing things like closing Indian Point, but now we're talking about not just moratoriums on gas, but not allowing it to be used in new buildings. The cost of energy is going to use the cost of development is going to skyrocket. There's also legislation in Albany that we're all concerned about, limiting the powers of IDAs, terminating brownfield programs, requiring things like prevailing wage. So these are all things that we have to plan for. If we go back prior to COVID, there were trends, and we think those are all going to come back into play. Multifamily and rental housing was in demand. Young people are less interested in home ownership. Their later marriages, more households. We need to build multifamily housing. We need housing for our empty nesters and seniors due to rising demographics. More people want to live in urban areas, TODs, walkable cities, particularly the young. We need housing for our workforce. We need affordable housing, cheaper housing. The only way to do that is to increase supply. So what I'll finish with is we all have to work together. We have the governor's housing compact, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today as to what can work and what can't work. We have to increase our housing supply if we're going to continue to have the quality of life that we've had here in the past in Westchester County, which we all love.
What a great overall kickoff for us, Mark, to really continue the conversation. And I'm going to continue with Richard Nightingale. We're going to come back to you, Mark. Richard, you're certainly a wealth of knowledge when it comes to building workforce housing. Tell us how you see this from a strategic viewpoint as an economic driver for communities, from reimagining brownfields to bringing life back to an area, to how new housing can add to the tax base. It's a lot to cover.
Yeah, sure. And I'll pick up right where, Mark left off. We need to evolve as a community. We are underhoused, across the board. And that's a little bit of everyone, right? That's at the market rate and that's below market rate, including the work that we do. I actually loved in the opening today hearing that term attainable housing. That should be our new term, because the reality is median income is so high in Westchester that when we're building affordable housing, or even what people would consider sometimes low income housing, it is all workforce housing, right? A family of 4 in Westchester, the median income is about 135, it's a little over $135,000 a year. So when affordable developers build to 60% of AMI, or income average to 60%, as our financing allows us to do now, we are building for like the lifeblood of our economy. We're building for people earning $50,000 to $80,000 a year. And these are the folks that staff our economy, that work on our main streets, that are teaching our kids, that are doing, so many critical things. So I think it is really important in Westchester to understand that all affordable housing is really workforce housing. Those are pretty much synonyms. I think after today, I'm going to use the term attainable housing, maybe exclusively because I loved it.
Started here.
And then on the last piece, I'll wrap up quickly here. But as far as like the tax, impact, there's never been, you couldn't find me an example where a beautiful, fully functional, fully occupied dwelling was torn down to build affordable housing. It's simply not not how it happens. Really, what we're doing is finding dilapidated buildings, vacant buildings, boarded up churches that have been there for decades that are not on the tax rolls, and designing beautiful, sustainable developments. So actually, affordable housing is almost always taking something that is either a very low taxpayer or off the tax rolls altogether and bringing it back, into circulation on the tax rolls, and really investing in communities. So, affordable housing is workforce housing in Westchester, and affordable housing is economic investment.
And Richard, I can say, I've been in many of the developments you've done and the initiatives, and your apartments are incredible, and the communities you built within communities have been life-changing. So thank you so much. And talk about someone else who really makes a difference in her community, Wilson Kimball. So Wilson, you are so plugged into the government and zoning and planning, as leading the zoning board and being on the planning board, and as former economic development of, as we know, Westchester's largest city. Can we talk about Governor Hochul's proposed housing compact and what you think about that?
Sure.
And how do you see this unfolding?
Marcia, thank you for inviting me today. And these panelists are great. Everyone is adding so much to this conversation. I think Governor Hochul's housing compact is more right than wrong. Certainly as zoning board chair, I take issue with home rule and questions of losing home rule. But she's right to think that we've added more jobs to the economy, but not as many housing units as we need to support those jobs. And she's right to realize that these properties should be done on TOD. We've done that in Yonkers. Mayor Spano did it in Yonkers. They're doing it in New Rochelle. They're doing it in White Plains. This is the right way to go. It's actually very good for the environment, because it's much more beneficial to not have people driving. And it's recognized by the EPA to do high rise on TOD within a half a mile, or in Yonkers, it's a quarter mile. And she's right to think that some of the zoning needs tweaking. I'm totally frustrated by driving around Yonkers and seeing sites that used to have homes, sometimes multifamily homes on it, which the homes were demolished or burned down years ago, and it's a vacant lot now. But under our current zoning code, it's not big enough to put a house on. So things like that are probably happening across the county, and those are areas where we can meet her in the middle with her compact. I do think that there is not a one size fits all for New York State because everyone's costs are different. For instance, right now, the housing and community renewal cap, tax credit cap per unit is $575,000 per unit. In Yonkers, it costs about $800,000 per unit to build a passive house affordable. So we need the cap to be adjusted for us, and that's also proven out by prevailing wage. So I looked up a prevailing wage for a boiler maker who makes, boilers, and in Westchester it's $63.38 an hour, and in Albany it's $39 an hour. So that's a huge difference. You can see the cost for an investor or a developer in investing in making paying the payroll. The other issue, and Mark was 100% right, is our infrastructure needs a lot of love and attention. If you look at the Hudson line around places like Yonkers and even towards Ossining, I don't feel like it's climate resilient. It looks like it's halfway in the Hudson River. So we really need, if we're going to put housing on TOD, on train lines, we need to look at the infrastructure. And also in Westchester, 9% of our bridges are structurally deficient. And we know that in Yonkers because we just had to close a bridge over the Bronx River Parkway because stones were falling off of it. So we need investment. I've talked to her office about the fact that some of those monies can come from the federal government through the IRA. But in all, I think Governor Hochul's plan is more right than wrong. And there's ways to meet her in the middle, and we should all be working in that direction.
Thank you so much, Wilson. We were so proud last week to host Governor Hochul at the Business Council Westchester to talk with employers about housing. 100% of them said that housing is a major issue in order to attract and retain employees in Westchester. So really appreciate your perspective and everyone else's. And Joe Apicella, you at McQuestion Development and Rella have really been first movers in terms of attainable housing and really meeting the needs in a very beautiful way of the community. And you've been involved in building affordable housing for many years in many regions. So please share with us what challenges you foresee in this economic expansion as it relates to financing and subsidies given the current state of interest rates.
Good morning, Marcia and everyone. It's an honor to be with this esteemed panel. And I want to thank the Business Council and John Ravitz for bringing together the development community as they have through the development group. That's made a tremendous difference in how we proceed. State of the economy, I think we heard it via Mark in a very concise, compact way. Those are the challenges. And we have to look at the solutions. What do we do as a community, as a county here in the state of New York to be resourceful, to continue to build high quality, affordable housing? And how we do that is there are funds together out there today through the American Recovery Act that need to be programmed. Hundreds of millions of dollars are out there that have not been programmed yet by the government entities to help subsidize the gaps in financing for people like myself at McQuestion and also Richard Nightingale's firm at Westhab. There are gaps in our financing scenarios, and it's caused by the rising interest rates, lack of infrastructure, the impediment to the approval process, all the aforementioned. We need to be resourceful. And in order to do that, also, we have to lobby and push the government to become on the same page. We've got to have the governor and the legislature be on the same page. Use the resources we have to move this county forward and to get our affordable housing built. We at McQuestion pride ourselves at what we call blurring the lines between affordable housing and market housing. And if you just look behind me, I would challenge anyone to look at that building and tell me it's affordable housing versus market rate or luxury housing. So it can be done. We need to steward the resources in order to do that. And a further discussion needs to be, how do we get more for sale housing built in Westchester County? Because there is a dearth of that right now.
Great. So that's something maybe we can come back to, because that's really important, Joe. So thank you. Thank you so much for that perspective. And Greg, you really have a huge view of a very large region. What is your view of people's perception of affordable/attainable housing? And along with that, with your developer hat on, can you talk a little bit about the governor's proposed housing initiative as it relates to municipalities, home rule development?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. So, yes, as it relates to perception of affordable housing, look, we are a market rate developer. We typically do have affordable components of our building, but whether it's quote unquote affordable housing or market rate or anything else, I think that there is still an ongoing perception problem on the part of a lot of communities in our region. I think that planners understand the need for the housing, understand the need for multifamily. Politicians usually, but a lot of the impediment, in my view, is often just the residents of the communities being ill-informed about what is going to be developed and what the impact will be to their communities. I think that a lot of people have an outdated view of multifamily in general, whether it's affordable, market rate, or anything else. And I think that particularly when you get into the more single family type communities, the kind of the classic bedroom communities, they tend to be much more resistant to seeing redevelopment. The train line type towns, even though they may have land or parking lots where there could be public-private partnerships to redevelop and cluster more density around the train stations, they're highly resistant, and it's an ongoing battle. And I think that to your question of Governor Hochul's plan, I think that it really is pretty critical that there is a lot more flexibility granted to relook at the zoning around these transit stations, around whatever radius, and kind of definitely continue to question the logic of home rule, and frankly, just the overall legal setup of the SECRA process, State Environmental Quality Review Act. It really slows down the ability to get new housing approved, and it opens enormous windows for people who may not even have a lot of standing to come in and challenge development. So it's, look, when I look at our region relative to all of the other regions around the country, Cortera is a national developer. My counterparts around the country, I see them cranking out just community after community where they are in the Sunbelt markets and other places where the regulatory environment is just a lot friendlier. And I think that we need to really continue to work hard to improve our regulatory environment so that as companies like Regeneron and others look at whether they're expanding, relocating to this area, or whatever else, they are confident that there is enough housing diversity here, that there's enough housing of all types, that their younger workers, the young professionals, have the ability to come in and secure a rental, hopefully as a bridge eventually to home ownership, of course. But
Absolutely. And we happen to know that young professionals are starting families later, as Marcus said earlier, so rentals are popular, and the nation has a growing population of single people who may not have children. So the whole way that the economy is structured and where people live and how people choose to live is very different. And Greg, you really provided a very important perspective. So thank you on that. Debbie, your firm, Houlihan Lawrence, you have a little bit of a different lens, right? As the largest residential real estate broker in Westchester in the Hudson Valley, Houlihan Lawrence, you have your pulse on what's happening. And we're all aware of the rising interest rates and how is this impacting the housing market And a lot of what you do, I think, is single family housing. And we're talking about how Westchester lives. So let's talk about that also.
Okay, well, the obvious effect it has on, if you have a buyer who is financing 70, 80% on a mortgage, they clearly are affected because, you know, their buying power was reduced in half. So some buyers may have been bumped. What we're not seeing is a decline in sales because, as we've all been talking about on different levels, the inventory is so scarce. And we came into 2020 with record low inventory. And then with the, you know, the influx of the buyers because of COVID, you know, that just further declined and further declined, you know, and a couple of other contributors are in Westchester County, 65% of our buyers are trade up or trade down. You know, we have 25%, give or take, you know, each town's a tiny bit different, but 25% come out of the city, a little bit from the tri-state, but the majority are all, you know, trade up, trade down from our communities. And when COVID was here, as we know, multi-generations all stayed in their houses. A lot of people moved home. A lot of people who would have scaled down didn't. And the interest rates, so now the interest rates have gone up. These buyers are sitting on, these residents are sitting on very, very low interest rates. And for them to give up those interest rates to trade up or trade down has created more of a shortage of inventory. I guess one could argue that the really low interest rates may have contributed to the low inventory because nobody wants to move. But yes, so we are seeing the problem of people not wanting to trade up, trade down because of it. I do believe that that will level off, you know, people get used to these things fairly quickly. And certainly some new buyers, but we have people lined up for properly priced houses in all of our markets.
We got
so
it.
we're not seeing the effects that much. It's just, you know.
I'm sure most of us listening or on have family members, have friends that are waiting for that time, that are looking at houses, and people are coming in with cash and just buying them. So
Well, that's a very good point, because we had a huge number of cash buyers we've seen in the last few years.
Definitely a shift. So thank you so much. And we're gonna come back and talk about that shift. But first, I want to talk to Michael Goldrick, the president and CEO of PCSB Bank. So Michael, given what you've heard from these real estate housing experts across the spectrum, can you comment on the banking status about lending and risk, especially from community and regional banks?
Absolutely. But first of all, Marcia, thank you for having me and PCSB Bank represented on the panel with the fellow panelists here. A lot of good points already raised with regards to the issues. I agree 100% with Debbie. My two key issues that I had circled were inventory and interest rates. Starting with the interest rates, prime rate right now is 8%. A year ago, it was 3.5%. So that differential is absolutely huge. And the interest rates are a key component with regards to affordability and what could be done. A quick word of advice, in case I forget to skip over it. Most of home equity loans are factored off prime rate. So at prime plus a little bit of a portion, it's still advantageous in this market to refinance out at current rates. 30-year fixed rate mortgages are in the 6.25%, 6.5% range, 15-year fixed, maybe 6%, maybe a little bit under. And then there's also some ARM products that are available that are still in the 5s as well. So you shouldn't be paying 8% plus on a home equity loan when you could take out a refinance, and prepay that loan whenever it's necessary. So just a quick word of advice with regards to interest rates. Those short-term interest rates are also impacting the housing market and the multifamily build-outs. Most construction loans are priced off variable rates, whether or not it be prime rate or SOFR. So the cost to do and develop properties, as Joe mentioned, is now more expensive if it's based off a floating rate environment. So that's definitely impacting the ability to build out, along with the other issues such as cost of materials, time for approvals, et cetera, et cetera. With regards to the, the inventory crisis, as Debbie said, existing homeowners are staying in place because they're reluctant to move. They like the rates that they have on their current properties, and don't want to move into. And as as Debbie said, a 65% trade up or trade down. That's a huge percentage of the marketplace. The market's also being impacted by investor purchases. So investor groups that are coming in and buying bulk and holding residential properties are definitely impacting what's being sold and what's being kept in market. Just by comparison purposes, if you're looking at the differential between renting and ownership, a $500,000 mortgage, even at a 6% rate for 30 years, the payment's about $3,000 per month. $1 million mortgage is $6,000 per month. So it kind of puts you in line with high luxury rental apartments. Those numbers, the 3,000 and 6,000, didn't include the tax impact, so you have to add in the tax and insurance, but definitely numbers that are compatible with the other opportunity of renting. With regards to a larger question, the banking crisis and what's happening right now.
Mike, I'm going to come back to that with you.
I was going to say it's going to take me longer than 2 minutes. So
okay, so let's hold that, because that's very, very relevant. But I think that you've really put a very realistic perspective. So hold on to the banking crisis, and we'll come back to you. And by the way, if anyone has any questions in the audience, please feel free to put them in the chat room. We will attempt to get to them. And and we've been talking. So Mike, what you've talked about is really a perfect segue, because you're talking about financing. And Mark, in a very different way, you help your clients handle financing through IDAs, right? And you work very closely with IDAs. How crucial are IDAs, industrial development authorities, to the continued residential construction boom?
Well, they're as crucial as you could possibly get. The continued health of our region depend on it, and the attacks in Albany against them are very concerning. The major projects we work on would not go forward without the IDA assistance. In fact, that is the legal standard that you must prove. In order to obtain IDA assistance, you must prove that the project would not be financeable without it. So you must have it. Otherwise, the project doesn't work. And for those who don't know, IDAs basically do three things. They offer you an exemption from transfer tax requirements. That's about 1% of the project cost, not counting the MTA piece. But so if you have a $100 million project, that could be $1 million of savings. The sales tax on construction, the rule of thumb is about half your project cost times the sales tax. So if you got a $100 million project, you're talking about $50 million times the sales tax. It's about a $4 million savings. And then, of course, there's the pilot agreement. And the pilot agreement is where you get the property tax relief. Why is it necessary and why is it crucial? So I'll give you the prime example would be a company like a Regeneron. The way we do our taxes here in New York State and fund our school districts and everything else through it, if you built an office building of 100,000 feet on a piece of property, a regular office building might only be $200 a foot, and you build it for 20 million. I know I'm just rounding here, et cetera. Regeneron, because they're building very complicated labs with equipment and things that you wouldn't put in a normal office building, that same building of the same size, that could be 5 times the price. It could be $100 million. And they're going to be paying 5 times the taxes. They won't locate here if that's the way we do things. Right. We have to have this assistance, and we have to fight to keep our IDAs vital.
Thank you, Mark. I think that's a really good example. And remember, Regeneron is bringing 1,000 jobs of all types into Westchester County. So
actually, by the time they're done, Marcia, it's going to be 5,000 more.
5,000. Yes, 1,000 to start. Thank you for clarifying that. So Richard, given all of this, and also looking from a strategic level, how can a better job be done of identifying the underutilized sites that West Hep does so well in turning into communities? How can we better identify them to turn them into wonderful, affordable, attainable housing projects?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think just hearing the panelists today, right, we come from very different vantage points, and we're dealing with the exact same set of criteria. Like, there's such universal themes here that the interest rates affect all of us. The constraints on local government and land use affect all of us, and that's market rate, and that's single family homes, and that's, you know, workforce attainable housing, you know, like we do. You know, it might be too broad an answer a little bit, but when you propose something beautiful, something great for a municipality, you need flexibility, you need a partner in that local government. We have, as you said at the top of the program today, we have municipalities, we have urban centers that have really made it their business to work with us, they want beautiful investment, they want TOD investment. And we certainly have communities in Westchester that have not, played that role. And Greg mentioned some of this earlier, very susceptible to, a very vocal minority of residents that doesn't want any change ever. And that's just not going to work, right? Like, we are where we are. I saw this stat earlier this week that in the last 10 years, New York's added something like 1.2 million jobs and only built 400,000 new housing units.
Mhm.
It's a math problem. I mean, it just doesn't work. We
Do
have
the math, right?
right. Yeah, we have main streets in lots of our smaller towns and villages that are asleep at 6 p.m. And, residents say, oh, that's such a shame. But those are the same communities that haven't made it easy to develop and work with. So they're their own worst enemy in some ways. So, we're all in the same environment. The interest rates, the cost of building are affecting all of us. At least what we could have is local support, towns and villages and cities, the county, who has our back, and Albany as well, so that we can bring these great visions to life. So you see a lot more of what's behind Joe in the future. And we all need that assistance. Mark made the point that the assistance we're asking for, we couldn't build without. It's not extra. It's not like, it's not a bonus. It's just to be feasible. And that's for market rate and for affordable. We just need feasible, financing so we can get a shovel in the ground.
Thank you so much, Richard. I'll share with you, years ago, Bob Weinberg, who really was one of the original developers in Westchester County, many are nodding their heads, and built so much of Westchester, both housing and office parks. He and his partner, Marty Berger. But Bob used to say to me all the time, one thing I learned from him, he would say, Marcia, just do the math, just do the math. And then he would rumble off because he went to MIT and he was a brilliant man. And he taught me to do the math sometimes, just stop and really think about it. So thank you so much. So everybody, there's a reason you took that algebra class in 9th grade or 7th grade, whenever. So we'll get back on topic. Wilson, how's your math? Your math is good. And I know that one of the mathematical facts is that Yonkers Housing Authority, how's this for a segue, is the second largest in the state after NYCHA. And during the last 3 years, you have redone every one of your units. What's been the result and what lies ahead? And congratulations. And I'm sure everyone who lives in your buildings is most thankful.
Thank you. We have a portfolio of 1,700 units and that we own and operate. We support 5,000 Section 8 vouchers. Richard and his team at West have our partners in supporting that attainable housing. We spent $750 million renovating all of those units. And I can tell you we're still facing some headwinds on that because even though we got private funding through low-income housing tax credits from the state and private investors like L&M, we were only able to renovate the kitchens, the bathrooms, the common areas, the elevators. So we still have leaky pipes. There's an estimate out there that each unit in a public housing, affordable housing, loses 100 gallons of water a day. So imagine 1,700 units, how much water we're losing every day. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for our tenants because that could be lost in the walls. It could create mildew. It could create mold there. Then it becomes an asthma problem or a COPD problem. So we're looking to the federal government. We're looking to the state to get more monies. The state wants us to electrify all of our buildings. I'm wondering if the power grid can support that because we're in favor of doing that, yet there's always the challenge on the other side, the unforeseen outcome of that success, perhaps. We're also trying to get this housing cap lifted so that we can build the new passive house housing. But what we're finding, and I've talked to the state, And they've been very responsive. Ruth Ann Visnakis at HCR is amazing. Her team is amazing. We're trying to build Passive House. I know Richard has built Passive House and others are looking at Passive House. But those units are more expensive. They're about 800,000 per unit in Yonkers. And also there's a very long supply chain problem getting Passive House mechanicals. It could be up to a year to wait for these things. And that
Wilson, can you give us just a very, very quick definition of passive house?
So Passive House is a highly mechanicalized and created building in which we seal the building to such a level that there's very little exchange of energy between the exterior and the interior. So
Thank
by
you.
adding insulation and sealing all the joints, you can control the air quality and the heating and the cooling very simply and with a lot less money and time and energy. And so because of that, it costs more money. The mechanicals for that are particular. They are built by Trane and other companies, but there is in some cases a year lead time on that, and that will slow down production. And we are seeing that in New York. And I've spoken, as I said, to ESDC and Ruth Ann's team about looking to bring that kind of manufacturing of
great.
Passive House to, Westchester.
Love it. Love it. Well, this is what economic development is all about. It's having great housing. It's having people building. It's using suppliers. It's getting manufacturing. So you're doing it all. And Joe, you're also doing it. And one of the things that you've done is really created a change in people's perspective of affordable housing. So can you talk about a little bit about what that's like and how you've accomplished that?
Yes, Marcia, I think it happens in many ways. One way is affordable housing can't have the kind of amenity packages that you see in luxury multifamily housing. Our project in Mount Vernon at 22 Southwest has a gym larger than the gym at the Ritz-Carlton that I built many years ago. So we also have a high technology scenario there with an Amazon hub at the entranceway. We have flat screen televisions indicating to our residents when the trains are coming. We do transit-oriented development, obviously there and elsewhere, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and the like, Ossining. So when you put these kinds of packages together, we talked energy efficiencies and LEEDs designations and sustainable development projects that will last many, many years, and a reduction in the energy costs using geothermal and other techniques. That's what blurs the lines between luxury housing and affordable housing. We also do a lot of senior housing, 62 and older. And there's such a need in the communities, particularly in the villages and towns in Westchester County, to have our elderly people age in place. And so many of them get to the point where they're widows or widowers and they need a one-bedroom apartment and they just can't find them. Demand is tremendous and the costs are so high, they can't afford to pay $3,000 a month when their Social Security is $1,500 a month. So when we build a 62 and older affordable project, that's something where you have no school-age children to educate in that instance, and it's more accessible and more acceptable to the public and so needed.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I think that, we talk a lot about young people, but we really want to take care of seniors, and we want seniors to be close to their families. And there's every good reason to focus on senior housing. Greg, I want to come back to what your company is doing in terms of transit-oriented development in the suburbs of New York City, market rate housing, and with the increase in population of cities due to the increase in urban luxury housing, how is that also impacting cities in terms of infrastructure, water and sewer, roadways, access to mass transit?
Well, I think of the fortunate part about a lot of our more urbanized suburbs is they already have a lot of the infrastructure needed to support denser multifamily development. A lot of our towns like White Plains and Yonkers and New Rochelle, where central business districts had a fair amount of density already. So I think that they don't have as much improving, generally speaking, to do as if you went to a slightly less dense area. But I think, look, the logic of transit-oriented development is that the train stations are already there. You know, why back when the train lines were laid out, denser development didn't happen is a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, I look all over the region. We look on, Long Island and other places, and you see some downtown areas around train stations have industrial buildings, low-rise stuff, one-story things. It's not efficient land usage that is really consistent with the needs of today. And it really just presents a great opportunity, as some of the other panelists were saying, to create an environment where you're less car reliant. You have a lot more ability to get out on foot, walk through the community, frequent the stores, which really is a virtuous cycle. I mean, I always say that the more residents that you have downtown or in a in-town type area, it's feet on the street, and all of those dark storefronts start filling up. Some years back, I developed a transit-oriented development in Farmingdale out on Long Island, and even though it was only 154 units, their main street went from 19 vacant storefronts down to 2 within
Wow.
months.
Wow.
And
That's really community changing, transformational change. Yep.
really is. And look, I'll tell you, I think that there's no question that the demand is there. We opened the Mitchell and White Plains here late summer this past year. We've done very well on leasing, but just to give you a sense for the pent up demand that exists out there, we leased 100 units in the first 32 days. We were upset that we didn't hit 100 in the 31st day, but we got there the next day. So,
Well, I will tell you, Greg, I was recently at the Mitchell, and our new economic development guide that we published with the county, the cover photo is in the top of the Mitchell, and it is unbelievable. It's gorgeous. So thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you. And so Debbie, just to come back, and it builds on what Greg is saying and everyone else. During the pandemic, we saw an influx of people moving from New York City to Westchester. I'm sure moving into the Mitchell and other places and homes that you sell. Now that the pandemic is over, has that stopped? And I really want to get everyone in, so I'm going to kind of rush the final people along a little bit.
Yeah, just quickly, obviously it did slow down. The urgency is no longer there. Where we're seeing it most, Westchester is always in demand, the great commute to Manhattan. We're seeing it in our Dutchess County area where it's a big second home market. And that's where you really notice, the lack of sales going on there as a result of COVID. But watching the areas build up around new developments, like I'm thinking of even Harrison with the Avalon going in, and Mark touched on, the problem with retail. And when you see these big buildings come in, it brings the retail. So it's hand in hand, but yes, it's definitely slowed down.
Thank you. And finally, Michael, just want to really get our last thing before we go to lightning round, which I want to leave time for, and one question. Talk a minute or two about the banking crisis and where we stand.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I guess the best thing that I can say is that, for all the listeners, is that the local community and regional banking environment is strong and vibrant and essential to the community. And unfortunately, I think the media is getting it a little bit wrong. And the fact that basically we added $4 trillion, or we printed $4 trillion worth of money, and then started to fend off inflation by raising interest rates 400 or 500 basis points, something was going to break. And those banks that broke weren't representative of 99% of the community and regional banks that are out there. Those banks are diversified in their deposit base, they're diversified in their investments, and basically taking that money in and reinvesting into the community. And unfortunately, now some of that money, and with the interest rate increases, that money is running out to treasuries and to other investment houses, and basically forming what Mark alluded to, which was a little bit of a credit crunch. So credit is going to get a little bit tighter, is going to get a little bit more expensive, but otherwise the local community type banking is essential to the community, is here to stay, and basically
Right.
will support as many local projects that we possibly can.
Well, I think that really kind of wraps things up very, very, very well. We have one question here that I really want to get to. I think it's a quick answer. How much of the housing market is being brought by commercial investors and companies as compared to individuals and families? Anyone just want to answer that quickly, or have a statistics there? Okay, well, we're gonna try to figure that out and get back get back to you.
Yes.
So, and Maura, I think this lightning round is going to answer your question. So we know, ladies and gentlemen, that there are many, many units being built along the waterfront in Yonkers. Excel is building 1,100. Greystar in downtown White Plains will have 500. 860 units for Hamilton Green around the corner. The Edge in Tarrytown has more than 1,000. CoStar Group recently said there's been a slowdown with all the new housing starts. It's not surprising considering how much construction has taken place over the last 3 years, but the apartment market remains healthy, although possibly cooling. What can I have 30 seconds each? With all the significant housing being built, how quickly can it be absorbed? So why don't we just go in order? Mark?
As fast as we're going to build it, in all honesty, it's going to depend on rents and it's going to depend on other things. But right now, I don't see a problem in having these, having the units that are currently on the board absorbed. I think the bigger issue is whether or not they're going to get financed and actually get built.
Thank you. Richard?
On the affordable housing side, we never worry about demand. We get 1,000 applicants for every available unit, and that trickles up to market as well. I agree with Mark. As soon as we can build it, people want to live here.
Wilson?
What they said.
Got it. That was easy. Greg? I'm sorry, Joe.
Ditto. We need, however, more for sale housing. That option is just, and I'm sure that Debbie can reinforce this, we just don't have new condominium product out there.
Thank you. Greg, your perspective.
Definitely agree with Mark about the ability to absorb all the new product. One of my favorite stats that I always like to quote is that Westchester County has about, and this may be a couple of years stale because I know that there's been a little bit more development, of course, recently, but Westchester County has about 50% of the amount of multifamily on a per capita basis as compared to the rest of the country. So we are severely underhoused.
So it can be absorbed, correct?
Correct.
Great. Debbie?
I agree, Joe. The scale down, they want to buy. They don't want to rent, and the rental prices are so high that it's not an option for them. They really want to purchase, and we haven't seen any new condominium developments, not enough of them.
Wow, we have a theme here. Michael, any perspective?
Also agree, and a big component there is a time for approvals. And I know Mark and Joe would absolutely agree that if we can cut down and shorten down that approval time, and Governor Hochul is definitely supportive of that, that would be a tremendous boost. Well,
So there is lots of opportunity here in this particular state of the economy in Westchester County. Where I think the state of the economy in terms of how Westchester lives and what this provides in terms of housing for our workers, as well as jobs during construction and everything else, is very, very healthy. I think the governor's compact will add to those opportunities, and we look forward to continuing this conversation, and frankly, to have all of you as Business Council Westchester members and leaders help us continue to move this agenda forward. It's very, very important. So we want to thank you all. We especially want to thank PCSB Bank for being the presenting sponsor. We want to thank our supporting sponsors, RM Friedland and Westchester County Office of Economic Development. Certainly all of our speakers. Thank you so much. You did an incredible job. It's hard to do a panel on Zoom, but you did it so effectively. And we want to remind everyone that the next segment of our State of the Economy series presented by PCSB Bank is how Westchester builds community, focusing on our not-for-profit sector, which is so important. So we thank, and that will be co-sponsored by by nonprofit Westchester as well. I know, Richard, you're chair of the board. So to all of you, we want to say thank you very much. Have a great day, and we'll all enjoy our homes, especially tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Marcia.
Marcia.